Hello everyone and welcome to a very special DF Direct weekly, or not so weekly because it's a special episode. Yes, we're talking about the Xbox Games Showcase plus Starfield Direct today. We're only talking about the Xbox Games Showcase part first. We'll have a separate video covering Starfield because there's just so much to talk about. But for this video, I am joined by two of my wonderful colleagues at Digital Foundry, including Alex Battaglia.
Yeah, hey there, John. I'm coming at you from a different angle today in profile because this is the best way I can actually watch the conference with you while we talk about it. So
that's right, because we're going to be watching stuff while discussing it because we're going to kind of go in order. But of course, we're not alone here. Over there in the GameCube, we got Oliver Mackenzie.
Hey, John. Should be a fun conference to go over today.
Yes, indeed. So Xbox promised a lot. And they always say X gonna give it to you, and I would say that they did a pretty good job of doing
Rest
just
in peace.
that. Yes, I know, seriously. Oh man, bummer. But the conference was not a bummer. They did show a lot of cool stuff. I mean, before we get into it, what did you guys think, just as a general thing? Is this a top tier presentation? Were you happy, disappointed? What do we got?
I thought it was the best of the three presentations in my view. I didn't love the format. The developer direct from January I thought was a really, really nice format. I would have loved to have seen more in-depth gameplay from a lot of these games if possible, right? Some of the games that are coming out a little bit sooner, especially games like Forza Motorsport and Hellblade 2, which have kind of been long in development and maybe are approaching their release dates. But in terms of the actual games that were shown, I think there was a lot of really interesting content and there was a lot of really cool stuff that was shown off. So in that respect, I think it was probably a little bit of a better showcase than the other two recent E3-like showcases we've seen.
I agree. Now, Alex, I assume you feel similarly?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely of a similar... I think these were of the three large AAA games showcases. This was one that had the most interesting games for me in terms of just like the variety on show. There's a lot of variety here in terms of genre, which is nice to see. And like Oliver saying, I do prefer less but more depth, but I'll take what we've been given at this point.
Sounds good. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to run down through the show as it happened, check out each trailer and discuss what we think on them. And it starts off with a banger with the Fable reveal. So this is the first time we've actually seen real footage of Fable. And according to the developers and the video itself, this is apparently running in engine or like genuine gameplay capture from what they're doing with the game, which frankly is impressive. They kind of kicked things off with some impressive facial capture. I thought that kind of reminded me almost of something like LA Noire, but at a much higher fidelity. You know what I mean? And then it kind of cuts to various gameplay scenarios, I suppose. I mean, it's all framed like a cutscene, of course, but it seems to be all this in-engine stuff. Actually, I'm curious to hear your thoughts first, Alex, on this.
Well, for me, this is our first time seeing, they're going to be using for this, as far as I understand, is using the Forza Horizon technology, which is an open world engine with a lot of cool modern rendering techniques, but we've only ever seen it within the context of racing games, of those open world racing games specifically. And here, actually seeing it with like a more camera level, smaller FOV because you're not racing along, slower paced. You get to actually see all the detail that they can push there, and it's really high in this trailer. I mean, we're not seeing what is like direct, unfiltered, direct capture of gameplay, which is usually different, but even in this more directed sense, we get a sense of what the game graphics are going to look like. One thing I think I'm going to say, just because Richard's not here, is they're saying it's captured in-game. As they say at the bottom, they say in-game capture or something like that. But they don't specify on what hardware, which is one of the things, one of the transparency things that we really wanted out of this conference. So that's a bit of a bummer, and we'll talk more about that later.
I mean, I wouldn't call this gameplay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly like snippets designed to show the game running, I guess, but it's not like there is no person playing these sequences as far as we can tell. It's a cutscene, and that's okay. That's just interesting wording there.
Yeah, it is for sure. But rendering quality wise, this is really what I expected of like current gen releases. That's what this looks like, something that definitely would never run on an Xbox One or PlayStation 4.
Exactly. And it's especially impressive given their previous work with the Forza Horizon character models. I mean, again, those are car games, right? But the character modeling quality in Forza Horizon, I would always describe as somewhat unflattering, perhaps. So to see how far they've come is pretty awesome. And what do you think about this, Oliver?
I thought it looked absolutely incredible. Just the incredible density of the foliage, the lighting, that Richard Ayoade character that they were showing off. Really, really impressive stuff. But there is one big caveat, because this footage to me really seems like handcrafted cinematic footage, and some of the comments from some of the artists who worked on this trailer do suggest this is like a custom bespoke sequence created for this event. And so it's really hard to evaluate exactly what is the state of the technology that's underneath it, what is the state of that game. It's hard to say without a presentation that's showing off footage that is clearly representative of the final product. So I still think this is like a TBA kind of game, unfortunately.
But I will say that thematically, the thing that caught my attention, of course, was with Richard Ayoade turning out to be a giant and the character sort of invading his home as a small person. And that right there, I think, is very interesting conceptually from a gameplay standpoint, or like the potential for what they could achieve there. Because honestly, I don't know how you guys feel, but I did not really like the older Fable games. Like, I didn't like the way they looked. I was not a fan of the way they played. It never appealed to me at all. And this, on the other hand, is extremely appealing and quite different from that, which is actually, cause for excitement.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I thought like the binary evil versus good stuff in the old Fable games was, it was. And I also just the humor back then, it was just not for me.
It didn't work for me.
It did.
Yeah,
it totally fell flat
it.
for me. Like they almost make light of some of that with like the chicken punting that we see in the trailer, which was actually humorous, because you can kind of get a sense that I imagine that like as you're doing these world things, there's a lot of NPC interactions in the background.
Plus,
with the like commenting.
Fable 1 back in the day, the thing that always bummed me out about that, and I nicknamed it Lodal back in the day, because there was so many loading screens and they were all so long, and like it felt like everything was segmented into these like little loaded chunks, and I found that really kind of broke the world flow that they were going for. Obviously that won't be an issue here. So needless to say, I'm very happy that Playground Games is doing this, because I think they're possibly one of the absolute best studios that Microsoft has right now. Like, these guys are very talented. They've done amazing work on the Horizon series, and I can't wait to see what they do with Fable. But that was a great way to start off the show. And then they continued with another game so this is one that I believe they labeled in-engine footage, which is usually just a sign of, well, it was rendered with the game engine, possibly Unreal. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it's actually like a pre-recorded, captured movie running from that. So, and they're not trying to show the gameplay here either, but the visual style of South of Midnight, that's the game we're talking about, looks really good, I think. Like, I really like this. It's got a bit of that Spider-Verse flair to it with the animation without any sort of interpolation between frames, which gives it a really cool look. I actually like that style of animation, so I'm happy to see it here. And we don't really know anything about the game, just that this is a really nice looking trailer. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
There's not much you can say about it other than that there are actually screen space reflections in the trailer. That's the other thing I noticed technically about it. But it's one of these things about whenever you do decimated animation, it's a question of how does it actually play into the gameplay, because it could be visually frustrating in those moments when you because if you think about it, you're not getting the exact same animation rate as the real frame rate. So it could feel sluggish or it could feel really snappy. It just really depends on how they actually do it here. I'm curious to see what if it applies to even gameplay at all. Does the gameplay actually have this decimated animations? Like, I don't know.
Hi-Fi Rush went heavier on that in the cutscenes, right? But then you have something like the Guilty Gear games, like starting with Xrd and all the other things that Arc System Works has done with that, where the gameplay is designed to mimic 2D sprite work, where it's just per frame animation, and they kind of duplicate that, and it works despite the 60 FPS scrolling background. So I do think it's harder to do in a 3D world where you have full camera control. It can look a little bit weird. Like,
agreed.
Do you remember the game Sable?
Yes.
It was a beautiful game aesthetically, but in motion, I think it looks terrible. They tried to duplicate this style, and it doesn't really work in that game. It just ends up feeling kind of choppy. So, I mean, I don't know what you think, Oliver, but I mean, outside of commenting on the visuals here, there isn't really much more to say.
Well, I went through this one frame by frame briefly, and all the character animation seems to be done on 2s, at least for the cinematic sequence. So it's running at 15 FPS in this 30 FPS footage, which is very similar to what you saw in a lot of Hi-Fi Rush, right? That was running mostly at 15 FPS for the character animations. But I hope, like Hi-Fi Rush, that for the gameplay they would just have full rate animation, because it is weird, you know.
I'll be curious to see what the game is, too, because this studio, Compulsion Games, they previously worked on Contrast, which was a PS4 launch game, which I thought was pretty interesting. But then they did that We Happy Few game, which had conceptually some interesting ideas, but it ended up being this weird, like, randomized thing, and I didn't really like it very much, despite that initial showing being very impressive. So it's kind of I'm kind of in a wait and see with this game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
as I assume everyone has to be, because we don't know anything else.
We literally don't know anything.
I do like how they made all the characters and all the environment kind of look like a wood carving, if you notice that, like all the little squirrels.
That's cool.
That's cool. And then the protagonist, presumably, of the game is rendered in a stylized style, but more realistic. I think that's a really cool stylistic choice. I'm excited to see where they go with it. But again, this is just a very limited sampling of what they might end up achieving.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then, speaking as to where we're going next, we're going to talk about the next trailer, which is a massive game. Literally, it's Ubisoft Massive, and it's a new game, a Star Wars game specifically. I've heard rumors about Ubisoft and Star Wars for a while now, and it's interesting that so many different publishers seem to be able to work on the franchise, which, you know, it kind of correlates with the way Disney's been. They've been very loose with Star Wars lately. Possibly to the detriment of the series, I would say. But still, I'm always interested to see what companies might do with this. And this one, they showed a trailer, just a pure cinematic trailer. But then at the end of it, I think they promised that, there will be some gameplay shown at the Ubisoft Forward event. So we should very quickly see what this game's about. But for now, I mean, I know, Alex, you're a big fan of Ubisoft Massive and their technology. Me as well. And I'm sure Oliver as well, really. They've done some amazing stuff with Snowdrop. There's no reason to doubt this won't also be using Snowdrop. So what do you think?
Here, I think the one thing I did notice, I saw this comment online, that it is very Star Wars in terms of just the beats, and almost to its own detriment, where you're like a young rebellish person with a furry sidekick, and you're like, you know, scrappy. Everything's so scrappy.
You're all scrappy.
Yeah, and you know, like, it is a little bit. We've seen this before. It is almost like this could literally just been the female equivalent character of something you see in the new recent Jedi Survivor, almost, in terms of just like visuals, which is interesting. But
like Cal,
it's like Cal, but you know, no mullet, no beard. And here, though, visually, the one thing I want to call out is we don't know if this is pre-rendered CGI yet. It's really impressive visually. Like, really, really, really impressive visually. So if it were pre-rendered CGI, I wouldn't be so surprised. But there is a frame or two in here that caught my eye in terms of being perhaps real-time rendering, or maybe it's just like an unfinished render that they left in there. But there's that 1 minute and 8 seconds. There's a shot of some stairs, and the stairs have aliasing on them, which is a little bit weird for a pre-rendered cinematic. But that is the only thing that caught my eye. Otherwise, because this is once again just a trailer, it's to give you a sense of what the world is. It actually doesn't contain any gameplay that we can see. So,
well, I mean, this could be one of those things where they just rendered out a scene using a game engine as well. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And
same thing.
It is. This to me does not look like it represents the actual visuals we'll see in the game, but maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe by the time this video goes live, they will have already shown it. And we'll look like a bunch of doofuses over here. Except Oliver. I don't know. Oliver, what do you think of this one?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I'm definitely inclined to lean towards at least that this is not going to be representative of the final product, because if it is, and if they're able to maintain that quality throughout, that would be a really stunning achievement. I'm sure we can all agree. This looks incredible. I did a bit of research into this, and apparently Lucasfilm reported in 2021 that Massive was working on an open world Star Wars game using Snowdrop. So it does seem like it's using Snowdrop. If this is based on Snowdrop in some capacity, it's hugely evolved in a way that's not really recognizable.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So, and then we had the conference kind of continued. We had this interesting moment, I guess, speaking to the fans with that triumphant music playing, which is, it's kind of like the typical. I guess this is when it became clear that we're just watching a pre-recorded show, which I already knew, but you see people in the theater, and I do kind of miss that stage presentation that you would get, and we got kind of a hint of it here. But then they quickly moved on to a new game from the creators of Spiritfarer. Have you guys ever played that?
No.
It's a cute, clever little game. I actually first saw it back at E3 2019. It's come out since, but it's neat to see that these guys are up to something else, and they've persisted with this sort of hand-drawn animated kind of style. And the game is called 33 Immortals, perhaps the sequel to 99 Nights. I don't know.
See.
The prequel? No, I don't know. It looks like
prequel.
Yeah. It looks like a top-down action RPG kind of game, maybe even Diablo-ish. I don't know, but it seems to support did they say 33 or 32 players?
Oh my gosh!
Simultaneous co-op, and seeing all these individual sprites running around in the environment together. It's interesting. I've not really seen something quite like this. I don't know what you guys think, though.
I mean, it gives me if you ever raided in an MMO, it could maybe have that bit of a feel, like where you have different people doing different tasks and you talk about it in a party, which would actually, if it's a game just based all on raiding, that's actually a pretty cool idea, because that's one of the most fun parts of MMOs. So, yeah. I don't know what the type of gameplay is beyond that, but it did look fine visually. I was fine with it.
There's parts where you're like, wait, is this like multiplayer Vampire Survivors or something? Because it's just like countless hordes flooding the screen, magic attacks popping off. I don't know. I'm curious. I mean, one thing I would like to see is like the ability to zoom the camera like way out and see the whole battlefield, kind of like that Castlevania HD game, if you remember. The multiplayer one that they did, where you would be running around the castle in multiplayer and you could actually zoom the whole castle out and see the entire level map at once, and you're like just a few pixels high, but the game was still active. Man. It was really neat. I wouldn't mind seeing this there, but that was that. And then, so this was probably like, I would say, I don't want to say worst, but this was the part of the conference, the Star Wars pre-rendered trailer, 33 Immortals, and then what followed was Payday 3. And you're kind of like, this is a strange direction to go, before it sort of popped back up again. And yeah, Payday, I guess, is, this is from Starbreeze, isn't it? And the Payday series is one, I'll admit, I am ignorant on. I have not really played it, given its multiplayer kind of focus. I previously loved Starbreeze's single-player adventures. They've kind of moved on, I think. Machine Games kind of embodies what Starbreeze was at one point. Yeah. And the current Starbreeze is more focused on the sort of multiplayer action. But I don't know. I mean, Oliver, when you see Payday 3 here, what are your thoughts? Are you like, I'm going to go play this immediately? Or, I mean, are you a Payday fan?
I played a bit of Payday 2 because my friends were into it. But this did not really appeal to me hugely. It also did not look dramatically different to me, at least from what I've seen from Payday 2. It's Unreal Engine. It's not pushing out any visual boundaries. Not that it needs to, of course, as a multiplayer game. Yeah, it doesn't really scream to me that this should be front and center in a showcase. Not super exciting to me, at least.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, I guess, is the fact that this was one of the first trailers they showed here. It seemed a little bit strange, just a little bit out of sync with everything else. But honestly, I can't complain. The series is popular. Most of the stuff in here is single player anyway. So it's nice that they brought something for people that want more multiplayer action, I guess. Alex?
Yeah. So for me, this is a multiplayer shooter, but the only thing that caught my eye about it was that the trailer was encoded at 30. Once again, this is a thing that we'll maybe talk about later, but the feed is 4K 60. That's great. We want all that. But encoding trailers as 30 FPS, unless the game was running at a pitch perfect 30 FPS with a half refresh rate VSync, there could be problems with that. And especially if you're showing off a multiplayer game that might have been recorded with something like, I know a lot of I just noticed behind the scenes, a lot of these like multiplayer game trailers are recorded with like using NV Shadowplay or NV Share in the background from like a real play of all the players playing together. And you're going to get like that wobbly 60 hertz container being pushed into a 31, and who knows what the frame games are going to come out on the end. Here it was smooth, which surprised me, but it's also a multiplayer game, and I don't think people are playing a multiplayer first-person shooter at 30 FPS.
There's no way that's going to be 30, right?
Yeah, there's no way people are playing a game like this, so a little bit odd in that aspect. I would prefer a 60 FPS trailer.
But then the next trailer, we actually got just that. Kind of. So before the show, it was kind of, I guess Atlas themselves leaked this, but Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3, the full Persona 3 is getting a full-on remake with modern technology. It looks overall great, although I was a little bit surprised that all the exploration footage seemed to be running at like 50 FPS. So like for a game that looks like this, the performance isn't very good even in this pre-release state. But again, pre-release state, we'll see. I like this series a lot, but I know someone that likes it even more, and he's sitting over there again in the GameCube. Oliver, tell us about this, because I think you were like extra hyped.
Yeah, so this has been rumored for a while. There was some leaked footage that came out earlier this year, and there were some rumors, I think, for about 6 months or 12 months prior to that, and obviously got leaked by someone at Atlas inadvertently a few days ago. So this is a full-on remake of Persona 3, of the original Persona 3. It's a complete remake with updated graphics, reworked events, new cutscenes, new writing, new voice acting, top-to-bottom remake. Visually speaking, I think the character models look great. And like a lot of Atlas's games, the real star of the show, I think, is the 2D work, like the menu animations, the character models. That's all super stylish. It's really, really cool. There's some stuff in here that's more of a mixed bag, like the environments. There's some good stuff, like I like the classroom settings, which really come quite close to the original PS2 work and the Persona 3 portable work. But in some other areas, you really notice just a distinct lack of ambient shading and just a very simplistic looking lighting, in the dormitory and areas like that. And it didn't look so flattering. And then some of the texture work didn't really appeal to me, like in the beach area. So I am concerned about that. It does not seem like there's any ambient occlusion or anything like that. And I really think that they should consider something like that.
Still, like, when you look at a trailer or a game like this, sometimes I have to reflect back on the types of stuff we cover here on DF. And I'm like, I'm just trying to imagine people sitting in a room talking about, like, does Persona have good ambient occlusion? And, I mean, they should. Don't get me wrong. But, like, it just feels so out of sync with what they're trying to do here, and it's funny to kind of dissect the visuals on a game like this in a way like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a funny thing.
Yeah, we have a different eye, and sometimes it's obviously out of step with what the whole entire purpose of a game is. But that's what we're DF.
I know.
We are DF. I agree with Oliver. Like, I actually really enjoyed all the 2D segments here. But it was interesting to see the lack of any sort of like secondary lighting. Although that wasn't like blue. A lot of it was just like blue-gray secondary lighting. I don't think the game has like a real-time time of day or anything like that. So I'm a little surprised that they didn't say like, oh, let's do something different, like Bates lighting for the other scenes. So
I'm really excited for it, and they are taking advantage. Like they're using Unreal Engine, I presume 4, although who knows these days, it could be they could be building it on 5.
Who knows?
Yeah, and they do have like motion blur in there. I noticed that they have a really nice,
which is weird,
little weird.
Like I love motion blur, but it doesn't look right in here. It looks like a Unreal Tech demo kind of thing, just running around like a map you made.
Yeah, and I also think that the Persona games sort of benefit a little bit from like more of a staccato look and a sharper look because they're mimicking animes and mangas and whatnot.
So that's actually where I feel it falls a little bit short. Like you look at stuff like again, the Arc System Works animation or Hi-Fi Rush, right, with that decimated animation style and that like sharp cell shaded look. Like imagine a Hi-Fi Rush style presentation for Persona. Not the same art style, but the Persona art style, art direction, but with that sort of character modeling and animation. And the fact that it's a turn-based game, I feel like that would actually work extremely well since they could have full control over the camera and really focus on making those animations look slick. And I recognize Atlas isn't the kind of studio to necessarily do that kind of work, right? Like their games are usually behind technically, but still it feels like a missed potential here.
Yeah, always with any game that's inspired by manga or Japanese animation, you always wonder like, should you really be doing like all these things that are like present in traditional 3D rendered games, or should you go for something that is more inspired by the 2D? And that's
Yeah, and in fact, in some ways, looking at this, I still feel like Persona 5 is the better looking game. And that came out on PS3.
Yeah.
So
I think in particular, like a lot of the I don't know. I'm hung up on the environmental artwork for some reason.
I agree.
But
I mean, it does not look great for what you would expect from a full remake.
So it gives me really, like, the environmental artwork reminds me of D4, if you've ever played that. Like, it's pretty
D4,
old.
Dark Dreams Don't Die or something.
Yeah, it really reminds me of that. Like, and I'm not saying that to be flattering. So, yeah.
All right then. So that's Persona. Still cool. I'm sure it's going to be a good game. It's a huge get from Xbox, but not as big as one that's coming up. But still, nice to see it. This was then followed up by Avowed from our good friends at Obsidian, I believe. And this is a game that was announced quite a long time ago. I think we saw some shots of it in the past as well. And visually speaking, it looks rather different compared to that. It seems to have taken on a more stylized, I would almost describe it as Sea of Thieves-esque at points. Like, not quite that far, but it kind of more resembles that. It's like Sea of Thieves with a little bit more detail, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think about that, Alex?
For me, so I don't want to say this fell flat, but Avowed originally, when it was showed off, was like a first-person cinematic, totally pre-rendered. But it was like, it reminded me of like Sword and Sorcery Dungeons, dark, foreboding, magical, but like maybe low magic, like low fantasy. And here, this looks actually really different. It almost seems like high fantasy, a little bit more playful, whimsical, tons of colors and saturation, and none of that other thing that we saw, really. And I'm still not exactly sure what type of a game it is, because the games that these people make are like open world light, hub-ish kind of games.
Which is cool.
Which is what we like, but it's obviously from the trailer, it's hard to get a sense of how big the world is, whatever it is. And I just think this, I don't want to say pile on the game and say it looks bad or something like that, but I think showing off that initial trailer was a mistake because it shows off like just two disparate art styles and two different expectations for maybe visual quality. Showing off a pre-rendered thing and getting people hyped up about the next Xbox exclusive, whatever. And then the game comes out and looks quite different. It could lead to disappointments, and I think they should have just showed it off like this and waited. There was no reason to show it off so early.
Yeah, but hindsight's 2020, so that's always the trick with this stuff. And I suspect Microsoft has learned a lesson about showing stuff too early these past few years, and I think we're finally getting back on track with these games starting to reach the point where they're closing in on the finish line, hopefully. But yeah, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I did like at least they presented it at 60 FPS, which suggests that might be the target of the Xbox versions, which would be nice to see, I suppose.
It was kind of wasn't exactly 60. Parts of it maybe.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
And this is again one of those titles that is Unreal and is, according to developers, Unreal Engine 5. I didn't necessarily see great evidence of Unreal Engine 5 from this trailer. And I think there is a bit of credential inflation when it comes to Unreal Engine these days, with everyone now claiming 5. I don't think anyone says Unreal Engine 4 practically. In terms of what they showed off, I do think this might be more of a hub-based game or a smaller scope game, just based on what Obsidian has done in the past. It does remind me a lot of Skyrim, and it has that kind of same almost floaty feeling to the combat, I think. So I hope they can do something interesting there. And it does sound like they're going to have like guns and a more varied combat system, and that's going to be a big focus. So hopefully they do something interesting with that. But yeah, I'm not quite sure what to take away from this at the moment.
Just kind of a wait and see, if you will.
Very.
But I mentioned the more stylistic designs, and that feeds right into the next trailer, which we don't need to go into too much detail on. But Sea of Thieves, The Legend of Monkey Island was announced. I have a soft spot in my heart for Sea of Thieves. It's one of the only games as a service, I guess you could say, that I've actually kind of enjoyed, especially early on when it wasn't clear what it was. I certainly remember sailing the high seas with you, Alex.
Yeah, we had fun
during the
that.
early days of DF.
That was a long time ago now.
It was.
Jesus, yeah.
That was your first real video, I think, right?
Yeah, it is my first real videos. I think it's like 10 minutes and 50 seconds long of me just saying like, yeah, it runs pretty well on PC. It's pretty good. Yeah, that was hilarious back in the day. And that's why I think the original Sea of Thieves is so compelling, because it does have that open sea gameplay with people taking up different roles on a ship. That's fun.
It was fun.
And this year, I mean, I don't know. I haven't played the game really since then at all, so I can't really say what it's evolved into at this point in time, but it's churning away. Rare just has not stopped working on it since then. So it's great to see them put out more stuff for it for people who like it. Yeah.
I guess the weird thing is it was revealed today after the show that like Ron Gilbert, basically one of the fathers of Monkey Island, didn't actually know this was happening, which I find is a little bit strange. Like, he just released a new Monkey Island game last year, which is excellent, by the way. And I'm just surprised that somebody of that stature would be completely unaware that this was happening.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know, Oliver. What's your take on this whole thing?
That seems weird. I think this is cool. I like the older Monkey Island games. I played them a lot when I was younger. This looks really, really cool. And it's coming out soon, but technically speaking, it's just Sea of Thieves, which is excellent, but, old hat pretty much.
Be curious to see if they integrate this story stuff into the actual gameplay in a meaningful way. I guess that's kind of the question, right?
Yeah, or like if it's just cutscenes. Yeah.
Right, if it's just a few cutscenes here and there, or if like you find Guybrush Threepwood and he gives you a quest to go to a place. I mean,
kill 16 skeletons.
Go kill 16 skeletons and come back, and then he congratulates you and his pants fall down. We'll see. But still, it's a free upgrade at least, or a free path. So
yeah, do it.
All right. This was then followed up by just some gorgeous looking visuals in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I guess they're calling it officially Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So is this like a sequel to Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Yeah, this is actually, I think this is them going back in time and saying, we should, like, back in the day, there were obviously expansions to Microsoft's Flight Simulator, but then they would also do new installments with new names and new years. And this is going back to that, and that's really cool. I think that's great because this trailer, for me, I think the original game is really, really gorgeous, and it still is. But they've been kept updating it over time. And one thing that this trailer shows off really well is that they seem to have gotten down like micro detail in the world on like the camera level a lot better. For maybe it's bespoke, kind of like the way they do their cities. If you know how they do that, they actually update cities with like non-procedurally generated things over time. They've been updating, like they did like last year, like European cities and all these things. And maybe this is a bit of that, or it's actually them having improved their procedural drawing system to a level where you could actually have like a randomly generated helicopter rescue mission on the side of a mountain, and literally almost any mountain in the game could look like that now, which would be super hella impressive. So that was the thing that caught my eye the most about this trailer. And I think gamifying Flight Sim is actually a really good idea. Like making it about like, because people buy these simulator games en masse, and having it actually have a goal other than just fly around and go from airport to airport and sightsee is actually really fun. I think I would play the game more as a result of that.
Yeah. So, I kind of feel like maybe this is going to do a little bit of it, but in my head, I've always dreamt of them taking the work they did on Flight Simulator 2020 and essentially making the Horizon equivalent, right? Like Flight Simulator Horizon, where it has that fun vibe of Forza Horizon. It's much more arcadey style gameplay, faster flying, maybe a little bit of pilot wings in there, if you will.
Please.
Like, take that as a foundation and build a different sort of game on top of it, and I think you have an absolute winner. And maybe this is doing some of that, but I guess we'll see, given it's still very clearly Flight Simulator, right? Not a branch of some other concept. So I don't know. Oliver, what did you think?
One thing I did notice in the trailer, beyond the focus on all these activities, which is an interesting spin, I didn't expect them to go there, but it's interesting, is I did notice in a couple of shots, the reflections. There were a couple instances where it was quite clear that they were reflecting off-screen elements, like the plane was taking off and you see the landing gear, but the landing gear is clearly reflected from a different perspective than
we call those planar reflections. Sorry, I'll see myself out.
Yeah, just leave this call right now.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, that's very true. That's very true. And yeah, it was reflecting from a different angle than the game camera. And when the pilot is in the air and you see those reflections in the cockpit on the transparent glass elements, without any clear occlusion problems, I think that's pretty decent evidence of ray traced reflections, and I kind of see that in a few different shots. So I'm curious to see if that's what they've done here. They do say in the blog post they've implemented some new graphics technologies without specifically name dropping ray tracing, but yeah,
good point.
I didn't spot any kind of SSR issues to my eyes, and then there was some off-screen elements. So I'm curious if that's what they've done.
So for this, it's been a while since I covered Flight Sim, but one thing that they've done in the past, and it tripped me up before, is that they do in the airport locations and hangars, they do put in planar reflections.
Yeah,
and in the cockpit, and in some planes, not all, they have real-time cube maps. But
yeah.
So, I mean, would I love for them to have RT reflections? Yes. Do they have them? I'm going to say it's like 50-50 as a result of them being as a result of them using other tech that is confusing at times. But other than that, but they announced they would have ray tracing at some point, like 2 years ago at this point in time.
Yeah, right.
So it's
Anything's
been a
possible.
while. Anything's possible, then I would say, especially on glass surfaces where things like cube maps fall apart, I think, way quicker.
Exactly.
Cube maps, so.
But in a nod to the classic Forza Horizon 2 presents Fast and Furious, they've done another movie tie-in here. This time with Dune, because the next part of the Dune films, the reboot of Dune, will be coming out in December or late November, I guess. When did they say that? But either way, yeah, November 3rd. Okay, so I can't wait. But yeah, they actually showcased some capture of this. I guess. I mean, I don't know how I assume this is a separate thing that they've integrated into the game where you basically visit this planet instead, Arrakis, and fly around in the empty desert.
Yeah, and that ornithopter, which is always a great word.
I hope they allow you to, I don't even know what to say about this. Like, what is this? What would you do in this exactly? Because the environment of Dune is beautiful as a backdrop for a film, and some of the architecture that's built on top of that is extremely cool. But as like a place to fly around, I mean, conceptually, like, there's not much there.
The thing that's interesting is this would be one of the first times we would see their tech be applied to non-real locations, because their game is all based upon like maps, big data maps from whatever, and then they simulate the world on top of that by populating it with like procedurally generated stuff. And here would be the first time we see like, oh, these canyons are just made up. Arrakis is a made up planet. So really cool, but what do you do in it? I have no idea.
What if they got like data from the film where they're just like, here's our like model scenes that we use for some CGI sequences. Translate the assets into the game.
That'd be awesome, because they have those assets as real 3D models, and I was actually wondering whether or not the ornithopter is actually like a version of the same thing from the film, because it's directly this the Villeneuve art style. So
it could absolutely be. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and check it out. I am curious to see where that goes and what it becomes, but it's nice that they're doing another one of those tie-ins. But then we move to our next game, and this one, I will say, this was probably the biggest bummer of the showcase for us, and it's Senua Saga Hellblade 2. I say bummer, not because what they showed looked bad. It didn't. But there were a couple issues with the presentation, but more importantly, for a game announced in 2019, I feel like this trailer actually showed the least about the game compared to every prior trailer, including the 2019 trailer. It's basically just Senua crawling out of a little cave thing, walking forward for 5 seconds, and then another cutscene.
Dude, John, I bet if you were to count the pixel color variation here, it would be like more than 50% black. It was
gray in the original showcase.
You can talk about that, Oliver, please. Please talk about the technical issues.
Yeah, so in the Xbox showcase, well, there are a couple technical issues. The first one that is present in all versions is there's some stuttering, some significant stuttering, and some issues with the, I don't know if it's the frame pacing or the frame rate. It just does not look right. But there's also an issue that's specific to the footage that everyone saw on the Xbox showcase, which is that the black levels were seriously elevated. It did not look right. I spotted this on my TV. I know it must have been awful on an OLED, really awful on an OLED.
Yeah, that's where I was watching. And I was like, wow, but it's fine in the actual finished upload. The separate upload, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine in that version.
And I mean, again, what's here technically still looks great, and I expect it to be a beautiful game for sure. I'm just still kind of confused as to what this game is going to be, and I'm surprised that we're like 4 years out basically, and we still don't have an idea of that.
What the gameplay even is.
And I mean, the original game, the whole purpose behind developing that was they wanted to create a game that felt like a big AAA title, but on a smaller budget and a shorter time frame, right? And they succeeded, I would say. But this taking so much longer and having the backing of Microsoft behind it directly, I would assume that they're creating something a bit more ambitious. And that prior gameplay trailer kind of hints at that in terms of scale. But, I guess I'm just impatient to see more of this vision. The one caveat here, though, to keep in mind is that they did specify that this game is going to be included in sort of the extended showcase that will be following in the next days. So maybe even by the time that has happened, what we're talking about here will have already been kind of old news and we've seen more of the game. That's what I'm hoping for, but we don't know for sure yet, right?
Yeah. One other technical aspect I want to talk about is I saw some discussion of whether or not we're seeing like really good looking ray trace reflections here. And I think based upon what we know about Lumen currently is that these are probably planar reflections shown off from the trailer when she looks in the pond of whatever gooey water. I don't know what it was actually. But like because usually you don't get such like super awesome texture detail or like shadows and lighting in ray trace reflections in modern console games. So
we should take people on a tour through the surface cache
so they get a sense of what actually you're seeing. It's like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Although obviously, I mean, hardware Lumen definitely improves things, right?
Yeah, so, for sure it does. It still uses the surface cache though. So
it still uses the surface cache. So you usually don't get that level of because the reflection here looks basically perfect.
Yeah,
which is what you can do with a planar reflection, right? It's just that planar reflections are expensive in their own way, and they're really only applicable towards flat surfaces.
Yes.
So you can't, the benefit of RT is everything can reflect. With a planar reflection, it's very specific for like a shiny floor, like a flat body of water, something like that, which is what they're doing here. So, but either way, we'll keep an eye on that showcase and see where they go next, I believe. Let's keep on going. This one, what a weird trailer, but I love it. It's
totally bizarre. It's great.
It's the next game in the Ryuga Gotoku series, which is Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. So it seems that they've shifted over to Hawaii, from what I can tell. And Ichiban, the main character from the prior mainline installment, he wakes up naked, showing off his butt to the crowd. Everybody's excited, but then he's like basically walking around the beach, and a bunch of American tourists are also kind of like in shock at what they're seeing. So it's basically like an isekai kind of game, but set in Hawaii.
Yeah.
The fact that they were all speaking English kind of excites me because Ichiban doesn't speak English, right? And if they throw him into this world where he's only able to speak in Japanese and he's like trying to find his way, and however this ties into the story, there's a lot of cool potential there in terms of what they could do with that storytelling. Because, man, the storytelling aspect of the series is just so good.
It's very fun.
But as far as tech is concerned, I mean, my guess is that this is still probably Unreal Engine, or now it's Unreal Engine. Like the studio's probably shifted over. What do you think?
I thought so that the bloom is the thing that just made me think like, because I don't think their previous Dragon Engine didn't have like a normal bloom that you could just see like when you look at like the blue sky and it would just like furl out on the edges. And that's what made me think about this thing being Unreal. Other than that, it's just like SSR and, bokeh depth of field, like things that just Unreal comes with, and I wouldn't be surprised.
It's very standard Unreal Engine stuff, but honestly, it's not what we come to the series for, and I'm sure it'll look fine enough. I am just a little bit sad to see it seems like the Dragon Engine's kind of on the way out. I suspect they don't want to invest in upgrading it further.
Yeah.
So I just hope it doesn't have any major Unreal technical hiccups. Ishin was all right, though, I suppose.
Yeah, Ishin was good. And it looked pretty good, too.
Yeah, okay. So following that, then, we got a Fallout 76 trailer. we don't need to say anything about this, do we?
No.
Like, this is just,
I don't need to say anything about
this almost feels like a thing that just has to appear in these shows. And I know these games seem to make a lot of money, so I get it. And I joked on Twitter right when this was showing, like, what are the chances of the Elder Scrolls Online showing up after this? And spoiler alert, it did show up 2 trailers later.
Yeah.
But the thing after Fallout 76, that's actually what's most interesting for me, is Capcom showed off a new game. And before they even showed the Capcom logo, they did this flyover of like a rice field with reflective water, and I was like, oh, those look like RE Engine reflections, like SSR.
They do. Like that awful.
Like it's that, and then the Capcom logo fades up, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So my first thought was like, oh, is this Onimusha? Because this looks very Onimusha at first, but then they start to show the double characters, and I'm like, oh no, is this? I like Monster Hunter, but I don't need more right now. Is this more Monster Hunter? But it is not Monster Hunter either. It is Kunitsu-Gami, Path of the Goddess. So it seems to be a new IP with a style similar to Onimusha, and it looks to be a character action game set in sort of a fantasy version of Japan, perhaps. I really like the visual aesthetic, aside from the SSR. I mean, I don't know, Oliver, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it looks awesome. I think it looks really good. I don't have too much to add there. I'm nervous about all the RE Engine foibles we tend to see in a number of RE Engine games recently. So I hope that they can clean up the image quality, and I hope that, you know, if someone at Capcom is listening, just do something with those reflections.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they have RT reflections, but they've been like left to languish and not been touched ever since DMC5 or whatever.
Right, but like, that also presents a performance issue on the console. So like, I would like to see them perhaps evolve their SSR at least. You know, like the SSR is just not good, or even just replace it entirely. Like for Bodies of Water, for instance, don't use SSR. Like either planar, although that's still heavy, or like a really nice cube map setup is still preferable to really broken SSR. Like that,
Completely.
It just doesn't look good. And I really hope those guys are listening and don't make that same mistake. But I love the RE engine otherwise. I think that it looks fantastic. It's very performant. It does a lot of things right. It's just that the way they handle reflections without RT is not good.
Yeah, you know, like I think one thing that's impressive about Capcom is just the wealth of games that they've been putting out recently, due to the fact that they have a stable tech base now, apparently.
They're really on fire.
So they're on fire. I'm happy to see something also that is not Resident Evil or, like John, not Monster Hunter. I'm really happy to see something that's different. Yeah.
Heck yeah. So there's that. And then this was actually followed up with what I thought was a surprisingly short, like really short trailer for Forza Motorsport, because, you know, we had that developer direct earlier this year, which was a nice way to showcase the game. But with the release date kind of creeping up, I kind of expected a little bit more depth on this. Mm-hmm. Arguably, I guess they don't need to right now because they had other stuff to show. But Alex, I mean, what were your takeaway from this, other than the fact that the reflections were updating at a low rate in a lot of the scenes?
I saw that too. A little bit confusing because they also showed off RT reflections at a couple points because you see the cars going by.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure what's going on there.
I don't know. There was also some other tech things that was a little bit strange, like when they show the garage upgrade area where you like actually tune your car. Like the image quality there was like really low, like in terms of just pure resolution, which surprised me. So I don't know if like if they were seeing Xbox footage where they're showing off different areas of the game, and at different points in the game, we've seen it before where like the garage is 4K in gameplay, something else,
right,
or the other way around. So that surprised me. Another thing, I don't know, I don't like the way they present Forza games in the aspect of they show footage that is quite obviously like photo mode cameras, and we already know that they do things differently in photo mode, so I can never trust what we're looking at, unfortunately. They say in-game, but it is not the same as like the in-game camera following the player, because these games have like a photo and a follow replay mode where the graphics are spruced up.
Well, you know, if they're showing replay footage, like replay mode is typically heavier than the gameplay, right?
Yeah.
And the replays here are all 60 FPS and look really smooth. I guess what you're talking about relates to more like when they did the Forza Horizon 5 Lego stuff, right? They introduced reflections that weren't possible in the actual game at the time. And
I just don't
they're like
trust
layering
it.
stuff on that you're kind of like, is this really like actually representative of what
That was
we're gonna see?
Hot
Is this
Wheels, I think, right?
Hot Wheels, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not Lego.
The same difference.
I was thinking of
Lego's
Lego
4.
2K Drive, okay? Lego 2K Drive. And Lego is also in 4. Yes, it's Hot
Yes.
Wheels. That's what it is. But yeah, like do we know, was this Xbox footage? Was this PC footage?
I can't tell you. So that's the one failing of the conference is not labeling the footage in a good. It's way better than before, but it's say the platform it's running.
Yeah,
on.
the label for this one was just in-game footage, which does not tell you a
Right.
ton, unfortunately.
Which, and for Fable, for instance, afterwards, some folks from Playground actually confirmed that, this is captured from Xbox Series X. So why
Sick.
didn't they put Series X capture in the label, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with Forza, we're left kind of wondering, like, what is this? Because I would say it looks quite good.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful looking game.
The one thing that is new about this one, the one new piece of information is that the release date is on October 10th. And I'm going to walk you through a very scary 10 days for us.
Oh yeah.
Please, Oliver.
Okay. On October 10th, 2023, Forza Motorsport. October 12th, Assassin's Creed Mirage. October 13th, Lords of the Fallen. October 17th, Alan Wake 2. October 20th,
Jesus
Spider-Man 2.
Christ.
So that's
Oh my God.
5 huge
I have no idea
games
how we're gonna do that.
in 10 days.
I'm going to raise my hand right now and say I will probably tackle Forza and Spider-Man myself.
Alan Wake on PC for me. I know that.
The reason I want to do Forza is like I feel like people are anticipating the return of Gran Turismo versus Forza,
Oh, yeah.
like I did with GT Sport versus Forza 7. So I would be remiss if I didn't do a GT7 versus Forza Motorsport 8, right? Like it needs to happen.
After that, yeah.
So we're gonna throw down with that and see how it compares. But yeah, that's Forza and a scary release time for us. My God. And then that was followed up with the Elder Scrolls Online Journey to Necrom. I mean, that game makes some serious money. So what can I say? I know why it's here.
Yeah,
just-
I mean,
It feels like
Not
the
much-
audience of the show, do they care?
let's just say that. Okay, I'm not super interested in these RPGs, MMORPGs anymore. But
Mamorphic
kudos to
is-
Microsoft that they actually show off a variety of genres of games. They showed a simulation game. They showed
True,
games that
true.
are like RTS element games. This is like an audience because Xbox is no longer just the console.
That's a good point, Alex. You know what?
PC's there too, brother.
When you put
So,
it that way, I agree.
Bravo at that
That's
point.
pretty cool. I'll give them credit for that. They're showing all kinds of stuff, including something we'll get later too. That's a simulation. But then they followed that up with Overwatch 2 Invasion, and I don't know, Oliver. Do either of you know anything about? I don't play Overwatch. I've never played Overwatch. I'm not interested in it at all. But so I'm hoping one of you guys knows Overwatch.
I played
Oliver.
I played a decent bit of Overwatch, like, probably 6 years ago. It's been out for a long time, obviously.
This is Overwatch 2.
Well,
it had a rough launch from what I understand.
It's Overwatch 2,
Yeah.
but it's Overwatch. It's very similar.
So what do you know what this invasion thing is? What is invasion?
I don't know anything about it. The only thing that I gleaned from this trailer is that they're bringing Overwatch to Toronto, I guess. That their new
cool.
map is Toronto, which is, I don't know, sort of bizarre.
Why not?
It's not really like a big cosmopolitan city, but that's interesting, I suppose.
So in addition, towards the end of the trailer, it says Overwatch 2, a new adventure begins. And when you use the word adventure, you kind of think of like more of a single player thing. Like I wouldn't consider an arena match an adventure. So are they indicating that there's more to this than what Overwatch typically has, or is it are they just being loose with the word?
some sort of co-op aspect is in here, but I'm sorry, I'm completely out of the loop with this.
The big
Wow.
question though is one, does this have seasons? Can somebody confirm or deny? Is this a game with seasons?
Yeah.
Okay, so this has seasons. Is this a game with battle passes?
Probably, Jeff.
Does it have battle passes?
There are loot boxes. I don't know what battle passes.
Oh no. Okay, well loot boxes. Because there's like a new genre of games that's basically like season battle pass loot box games. Is the way I look at it, where like those are the things, that's the whole game, is just like you do some kind of thing which may be shooting or clicking or whatever, but the whole point of the game is to do It's
the battle pass.
The different seasons, the battle pass, and the loot. And you got that, you got a winner. So if Overwatch is missing, I don't know. It better have battle passes because that's the hotness. Do you know what else is hot? Well, sort of. I don't know.
Kinda.
Atlas comes back, and this time with Persona 5 Tactica, which conceptually sounds pretty awesome. I love these tactics games. Visually, though, maybe it's just me, but I'm not a huge fan of these weird chibi designs they've created. It kind of makes me... I mean, it's not the same style, but when I see this, I think, I'm thinking Funko Pops.
Yeah.
Like it's just that kind of like weird proportion characters. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Oliver.
I mean, the older Persona games and older Atlas games did have this, but that was more of a limitation of the like PS2 era hardware that they just...
Yeah, but not quite like this.
Right. This is much more exaggerated.
Yeah. But still, it's another Atlas get, which is cool.
Yeah, I think from a visual perspective too, just on top of the chibi stuff, like it looks pretty basic. There's a lot of low-res textures. The character models are pretty simple. There's like not much in the way of normal maps. I have no idea what engine it's running on. It could be Unreal. I mean, it wouldn't be totally inconceivable that it could be Unity either.
Yeah.
But to me, I think it's cool because it kind of looks like it's sort of an XCOM style game. There's turn-based gameplay, which is kind of oriented around a grid system. You have characters that are taking cover. I think it could be cool. My only caveat is there's a ton of Persona 5 spin-offs at the moment, like Persona 5 Dancing, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 5 Strikers, and there's a Chinese exclusive mobile game called Persona 5 The Phantom X. And they've kind of screwed with the chronology where they added some characters in some games that don't show up in games that are supposed to be subsequent to that and things like this. So they've kind of, I just think they should leave it alone and move on to other pastures at this point. That's my only complaint. But I think it looks cool. Like, I think tactics games are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what else looks awesome is the next game. And this was, I thought, one of the most striking games shown. And it comes to us from Don't Nod again. They just showed off Banisher's Ghost of New Eden at JEF CON, right? Mm. And then they're back here with another game called Jusant, which seems to be a Strand game.
It is a Strand genre game. Oh my god.
It's like a climbing adventure, mysterious kind of thing, but the visual design, the atmosphere that it seemed to be going for looks absolutely sublime. I really like the look of this a lot. And also, when they would zoom in on the character model, you get these really super sharp shadows, self shadows.
Yeah.
Which was really good looking, assuming that's actual in-game footage, mind you.
I think this is a UE5 game, actually.
Yeah, there's so much like beautiful indirect lighting going on. Just like the hues of the desert sand sort of reflecting and bouncing around all those different areas. It just looks awesome. So this could very well be a UE5 game taking full advantage of at least many aspects of the engine.
Yeah, and the thing I also like is, so we don't see it too often, but it's just like vertex colors. I don't even know if there are textures in the game. And that is really awesome. I love games that go for that look, and cool. And another Strand type game. I mean, John and I have complained in the past about how open worlds are just like, you go from mission giver to quest zone and you turn on your Arkham detective vision and you complete the quest and go back and whatever. But if it's a game all about traversal and that is the gameplay itself, well, then it's fun in its own right, going places and seeing places. So.
That's exactly what's missing in so many open world games is like there's no purpose to your time in the world in many cases. And by creating the challenge of navigation, they've built something that's more compelling, especially with scenery like this, right? Like it's really interesting to explore. And also, hot news tip, there is a demo out on Steam right now.
Holy moly.
So I am downloading it and we're going to check it out. See how that looks. So that's good. So yeah, that game looks awesome. The next one was something called Still Wakes the Deep. Oh, it's from this is the one by the Chinese Room. They were the guys that did Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, I believe.
Yeah, and also, did they do Dear Esther?
They may...
Is that them? Don't like me make up stuff here.
Yes,
it is. It is.
Yeah,
from them. Yeah.
They did something called Little Orpheus, apparently. I
did
need
not
to
know
see what that is. I have never heard of this. Oh, wait. No, it is actually out on consoles. Oh, it came. Okay, I see why. It came out on Apple Arcade in 2020, but then 2 years later it came out on consoles, and that's must have gotten swept under the rug. I guess we'll have to check that out. I'm curious. But anyway,
So-
what do you think about this?
I think it's awesome because, well, I like creepy things, and this game just looks full on creepy
do.
the entire time. So, like things that are creepy, outer space, scary,
Yep.
underwater, scary. So, I'm really
Abandoned
cool with
oil
it.
rig.
Abandoned
Very
oil rig,
scary.
in the 1970s, apparently, something like that. That's really cool. And I think one thing that John talked about, well, Dear Esther, as well as Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, is all those games, and this one I imagine will be too, based on the visuals here, is they kind of have like really good usage of like the tech of the time. Dear Esther was like super high res source looking game. Everyone's Gone to the Rapture was CryEngine, oddly enough.
It was, yeah, I know.
And this is, I'm gonna imagine this is Unreal, and it's gonna be pushing like super high detailed assets like right in front of the character, because it's a first person game and you need that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to see how it is visually, gameplay wise. Their games are usually just kind of walking around, interacting with the environment. It's not a lot of direct, actionable gameplay in that sense, but atmospheric stuff is also
It's
good.
basically like a modern take on Myst,
Yeah, it is a lot more like that. It's a good point.
which is fine. I like those games. Mm-hmm. So, okay, that's a good looking one. This one I know, from what I remember, this was the game that Oliver was most hyped about. He just would not stop talking about it. Dungeons
What?
of Hinterberg. Oliver, tell us why you're so excited.
Not quite.
Sorry, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
No, we're not joking on this. Actually, the art style looks awesome. It just it runs very bad in the trailer.
Yeah.
It does.
Right?
Yeah, all kidding aside, it does run very poorly. I think that there are some aspects of it that I was not in love with. Like, it looks very noisy, I found. The image does look very noisy. I kind of wonder if maybe the texture detail is a bit excessive for the kind of line art stuff they're doing. And if you look into the detail, there's like a lot of weird shimmering, almost like kind of posterization. You get all these weird artifacts. And I did a bit of looking into this, and this is running on Unity. So
Wow.
that's interesting.
So
it's the only Unity game in this presentation. I just hope they're able to bring performance up, and maybe they should, like, I don't know, simplify the texture work, get it kind of in a zone where you get less of that annoying visual noise at a distance, because I think the game would benefit from it, just a simpler scaling back of all that.
I think a solution to this visual problem could be like a nice depth of field, like not a heavy one, but for far distance stuff, do a little depth of field, give it a slight tilt shift look that might work with the aesthetic, or at least change some, because that wouldn't require like changing assets or like anything like that, right?
Yeah.
But there's other ways you could improve it as well, I'd imagine.
So looking at the trailer, it is presenting as 4K here, but I think the trailer is actually 1080p. And one thing that I'm noticing is that just like even very basic camera movement is causing aliasing on every single thing. I don't think this is TAA. I think it's like FXAA or something like that, and which would help explain whatever Oliver's seeing as well there too. But even then, dialing back the textures is one way to make it not so noisy. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, so strange little game. And
Cool.
so
though.
one of the comments we made earlier there about, yes, the trailer performance is not good. And I think we understand that when a game is still in development, it's not always going to show at a great frame rate, right? But I usually would like to think that when showcasing a smaller game, especially, they would want to at least render it out in a way that the presentation is smooth in the trailer, provided they believe they can get to that level of performance. Because, this is a small indie game and they're showing it running poorly. And I feel like that could potentially make a bad impression, even if the final game ends up running great. So something to consider there.
Yeah.
And then this was followed by a showcase of Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, which they brought Keanu back to the stage, and he seemed to be slightly unwell or talking in a very strange fashion. I was a little bit confused by his delivery.
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. I got the mental image of Keanu Reeves being called up on the phone and being told to say lines and with little to no context. I don't know if that's just because his character at this point in the game is like just fed up with the world or something like that. But the line delivery left a bit to be desired in the trailer. But the rest of the trailer, though, the rest of the voice acting is great. I really prefer female V's voice actor to the male one, who I think she sounds awesome. And the interesting part of this too is we're seeing this actually Xbox Series X quality settings. I don't know why they didn't just run it on an Xbox Series X, but it's good at least they're being representative here of what you should expect visually, maybe not performance-wise, but visually of what you get out of.
But hey, we all know that this should support overdrive, I'd imagine, right? And that's that's what we really want to see.
Yeah, and like the one thing is like this is also a next gen only expansion pack, current gen only expansion pack. Excuse me. And one of the things that you could probably level against the original Cyberpunk 2077 is it totally overshot the last generation consoles. That's why it runs so poorly. But like they still had to make sure it actually ran there. So there would be still limitations to a certain degree. And here with Phantom Liberty, since it's a new zone, and apparently they've done a lot of work on the base game for Phantom Liberty, like they're going to actually be changing up like a lot of the open world aspects of the original zone you can go to from the first game, or from that pre-expansion pack game, that they're probably going to be actually amping up some of the aspects of the visuals for Phantom Liberty, since it doesn't have to run on those pieces of machines.
Ooh, Alex, spicy. It's a situation similar to Horizon Forbidden West, where the Burning Shores add-on was not created for PS4, and as a result, they were able to push the visuals out in some interesting ways beyond what I think would have been feasible on PS4. So it's kind of the same thing here. All I can say though is seeing this trailer, I kept thinking like, I was watching this with a friend last night and we were joking over the idea that hopefully once the modding community gets their hands on this game, they'll be able to replace Idris Elba, who's in this game, with a giant Knuckles model.
Well, because of Knuckles,
from the films, like, I feel like the modding community almost owes it to the world to deliver this, and I look forward to seeing Knuckles in Cyberpunk.
Yeah,
so let's go.
Sure.
To dovetail, not so much with John's comment, but with what Alex was talking about ditching last gen systems. I'm not sure if you saw this, Alex, but CD Projekt posted a very interesting update, which I'll post in the chat here. Basically, what they've done is they're dropping support on PC for hard drives, which I think is very interesting.
Sick. That's awesome.
And also updating the game system requirements to, I think, increase it a little bit across the board. So I thought that was interesting. They say that
I did not see that.
The game will continue running on hard drives, but they're no longer validating updated versions of the game, and it might, presumably might not run so well after certain updates on hard drive based systems. And they might remove that weird hard drive toggle
option
that you remember, Alex. So I think that's cool too.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that was a thing. I'm really happy you said this to me. I mean, that could imply a lot of things. It could, they're not going to validate it. But if they are doing that, one of the things that was really common on the last gen consoles that Tom would always put on his footage was that you'd like walk up to someone and it would like 10 to 15 seconds later that their model would load in like at a higher detail. And, that'd be awesome to see them maybe push even SSDs even harder in the new version of the game, because the game really does kind of require it for like a lot of the open world streaming for sure.
All right.
Nice.
Well, since we're talking PC, it only makes sense to go on to the next game, which is City Skyline 2, with a very nice epic trailer, I would say, that showcases some beautiful vistas. And City Skylines has kind of become the replacement for SimCity, unfortunately, for SimCity. And it's largely considered the superior modern city builder. And it's nice.
It really
it's nice to see this here. It looks like they've made some big strides in terms of the visual quality. And I mean, you know what this game's going to be. It is basically a SimCity kind of game.
Yeah, and like one of the things, they kind of like straddle the line between realism and like sci-fi, I feel a little bit in the games. And this looks very much the same there. The one thing, obviously, I haven't played City Skylines since it really came out, actually. I don't know if there's like a humor angle in the game at all, like SimCity. like SimCity can be kind of pretty humorous, with
Right,
how
right.
the cities evolve and the random stuff that happens. But if that is or is not here, I would like to actually see it, because I do actually think it's kind of funny. Not when Godzilla attacks or UFOs attack, but if like humorous, like waste disposal things can occur in the game, I'd like that.
Indeed. No, this one seems to be a little more buttoned up in general. So, but still,
Cool,
it looks good. I'm glad that they showed a game like this at the Xbox showcase. It's nice to see. But then we get to the big unexpected announcement of the night, I think, which was Metaphor ReFantazio. Like, what a name. But it seems to be a new, it's not Persona, it's not Shin Megami Tensei, but it's kind of both, maybe.
Yeah.
It seems to have a lot of, Oliver, why don't you take this away? Because I know you're the big fan of these on here anyway.
It was actually announced all the way back in 2016 as Project ReFantazio, but I guess they've
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They've renamed it, and obviously that was so long ago. So yeah, it basically is a new announcement as far as I'm concerned. Like a lot of Atlas titles, I think the big visual takeaway is the 2D artwork and the menus look really, really good. In this game, there's like a gothic style. They're going for more of a fantasy vibe to it, which is really cool. I love the way they've laid out like the main menus and all that stuff. The one caveat, and it is a big one, is as I was going through the trailer, very carefully, I did notice that if you look through the text, you can spot a lot of elements that look extremely similar to the Persona games, like extremely similar. So there's a calendar. There's a turn-based combat with 4-person parties, some kind of attribute system, a fusion system for creating archetypes, and a lot of other things that just look like map almost directly onto Persona. So I really suspect this is going to be very similar to those games in gameplay terms, which I would have loved to see more of a break from. And then the only other thing is that in terms of the 3D, I don't think it's doing anything extraordinary. The character designs look cool. The environmental art looks okay here, but like nothing extraordinary. And it is a current gen only title. I'm not really seeing anything that would, push current gen hardware at all. But I think it's a really cool game. I think what they're doing with it is really interesting. Even if it does end up being very similar to Persona, which I suspect, based on the number of commonalities to Persona, which is itself quite a unique game series, that it's going to be quite similar.
Beyond that, just the fact that they got this as a day one kind of Xbox game, it really shows how strong the relationship between Microsoft and Sega Atlas has become. And that's that's exactly the types of things that we wanted to see on the Xbox side of things. And something they've struggled with is getting that solid Japanese support. Again, they've had solid Japanese support in the past. Even the original Xbox, it had some amazing stuff. Xbox 360, there was a ton of it, but then it just sort of fell by the wayside during the Xbox One era. And it really feels like they're trying to get that back. So that's good. It's good. But then we have just a few more things to discuss for this showcase, I guess. And the next one is something called Towerborne, which almost feels like the name of a fake game.
Yes, it does.
Like, this.
Sure.
I don't know what to make of this. This is from the Banner Saga people, right?
Yeah.
Have either of you guys played the Banner Saga? I have not. I'm unfamiliar with it.
This is not very similar to the Banner Saga.
It does not seem to be.
No.
Positive things to say, as I really like the background art. When you're on the 2D plane, very cool.
That does
2D
look good.
parallax, Studio Ghibli looking backgrounds there. I like it. I have no idea. Gameplay looks like a co-op kind of.
Yeah.
Like, what do they call those? Like beat 'em ups,
kind of like Castle Crashers or something like that.
Yeah, Castle Crashers is what came to mind, actually. So that's a good point. Yeah, that's what it looks like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so not the most exciting for us, I suppose.
I think
but then
the cell shading looks super clean.
It does. It looks visually nice.
Yeah, and the background art I think is good. My only kind of point of contention here with respect to what we're seeing so far is that it is all at 30, it seems like. So, but I mean, this kind of game, I would really kind of expect that the final version would operate probably at a higher frame rate on console. But it does look really good. I just hope that, I mean, that aspect of it, I think will probably be sorted out.
Absolutely. And then we get to BioShock Infinite 2, Oh, sorry. I mean, it's a Clockwork Revolution from In Exile, interestingly enough. And it's hard to take away. I mean, it's honestly really striking how BioShock Infinite this looks. You know what I mean? Like, this looks... I mean, this is basically the exact same aesthetic as BioShock Infinite, to the point where it's a little bit surprising, you know?
Yeah, I guess
In
it's
Exile makes some really good stuff, so I expect it'll have more depth at least.
So the one thing about the BioShock Infinite art style, not to defend In Exile here or anything like that, but it is literally just steampunk. Like, it is like turn of the century steampunk, and so it's an entire genre actually, almost at that point.
It just looks very much like it's not just steampunk though. It has this kind of airy. It looks like it's set in a sky city somehow, even though I suspect it's not.
Yeah,
no, it's not that in a sky city. No,
there are some common elements that aren't necessarily just steampunk or retrofuturism. Like, you have those overhead rail lines, which are very distinctive in BioShock Infinite. And they're here, slightly different form. You have trains running through them instead of the main character with this. I mean, it's very similar, I think.
Well, I mean, BioShock Infinite had the trains.
That's
right?
True. I mean, they looked a little different, but it's so close. And then you also have the fantastical weapons and kind of magic-y stuff, and looks very similar.
If you want to enjoy this, then I'll also drop this in our chat. YouTube identifies videos based upon their content, and it's actually at the bottom of the trailer. It identifies it as BioShock Infinite, which is very funny. One thing is, like, I like their games, In Exile's game.
Yeah, I agree.
I like Wasteland and stuff. So this is a very different perspective than the ones they've done in the past, like first person. Apparently also RPG. This is one thing, the Shock games don't actually have our RPG elements.
No, not really.
No, they're not. They're not RPGs. So if this is actually an RPG, that could be really cool, because then it'd be going in the more classical Shock route instead of whatever BioShock Infinite was.
Right, but in addition, they showed that section around 1 minute 30 in the trailer where he destroys a bridge with some nice looking destruction work, but then rewinds time. So there seems to be a time travel aspect to it. Perhaps they're also showing different iterations of the future, suggesting like you maybe have some kind of major impact on what happens to this world, which again could dig into those RPG mechanics. So it's really hard to gauge exactly what this is going to be. But In Exile's name on it does excite me, I will say.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And in terms of engine technology, not that there's much suspense, but this is Unreal, and they do say UE5, so...
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
And that's fun. BioShock Infinite was still derived from Unreal Engine 3, I believe.
Yeah.
And this doesn't... I wouldn't say that this looks that much better visually, but again, I don't think we really expect that from In Exile either.
Well, I mean, you got to go back to BioShock Infinite. Like, that game, like, if you go and play it right now, but it looks so 2009.
It does,
even though it came out in 2011 or whatever.
Somebody that worked on BioShock Infinite was posting a bunch of direct comparison screenshots, and when you see them side by side, it's like, oh, this really looks, similar.
Yeah, but not in terms of engine tech.
No, not in terms of engine tech.
No.
I do think that BioShock Infinite was probably a bit more stylized than this, if I was going to defend it.
It was more pushing for realism. Yeah.
So then after that, I guess Phil came out wearing a Hexen t-shirt, which was awesome, because Phil doesn't just tease things for no reason, right? He has a history of teasing things that do eventually come to pass. So I have some hope that some sort of Hexen project is in the works. I would love a two-pronged approach with a complete new entry as well as a proper remaster of all the Hexen games. But who knows if that would actually happen. But still, that's cool. And then that was actually followed up with the announcement of a black Xbox Series S console with a 1 terabyte SSD selling for $349. And there is something slightly, I don't know, odd about the console that's getting the first revision is the S, Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just storage, right? There's nothing else that has changed here. It's just storage in the casing. But, I don't know. What do you guys think?
For me, yeah, I would have actually liked to have seen what they can do for the Xbox Series X, because obviously it's chunky in its own right, and maybe iterating on that with a different design would have been really cool. It also implies a little bit, like we've known for a while, John, that they're just pushing for the digital future, all digital future, and this is not a Xbox Series S with a Blu-ray drive. So
yeah, that was actually what I know it's not necessarily for me, but I was kind of hoping that they would spin it around and it has a disc drive on there. But that is so outside of what they want to do with Series S. So I get it.
I think the black color looks awesome. I think that it's like all black, unlike the kind of two-toned look that you have with the quote-unquote white Series S with the black fan cover. I think it looks awesome. My kind of contention here, though, is that when you do start to increase that price in the Series S with more storage, it starts to get into the territory of unflattering comparisons. First of all, obviously with the Series X, which is 150 USD more, which is not an enormous amount more, and then also, especially with the PS5 digital, which is only $50 more for an enormously more powerful machine with, I guess, very slightly less storage, but in every other respect, it's a much more powerful system. So I think that getting that price up starts to push you into more unflattering comparisons in a way that's not,
I feel like, and I don't know that they could support this so easily, but I feel like the major announcement, the big play would have been to say, here's the new 1 terabyte Series S for $299. The original Series S is now $249. Yeah, that would have made some waves, right?
It's a game changer, I think, with that pricing.
Big time.
Yeah.
But I get it. Component costs, everything. It's crazy right now. But still, interesting announcement. But of course, the big game of the show, and we're not going to get into that here necessarily, other than maybe some quick first impressions. It was the Starfield stuff. Starfield Direct, and they were very serious about that. And I have to say that they did a really great job with that presentation, and I look forward to sort of breaking it down in another video, because there was a ton of depth there. That is absolutely that's one of the best game presentations I think I've seen in a long time, in terms of spelling out exactly what their goals are, showcasing how all the different features work. It gives you a very clear picture of what that game is. And obviously that's not viable for all games. You got to be a certain level of something like that, like a Bethesda game studio kind of release. It's the same kind of thing I could see, not that they need to, but Rockstar, if they did a GTA 6 reveal, they could drag that out as long as they want and do whatever and just show it off. This is one of those games. It's a huge game. And I mean, again, we'll talk about the game, but they also showcased the new controller, the headset, and everything as well, and the watch. And I really like the industrial design on the Starfield related products. It's the first time where I looked at a special controller and thought, you know what? I wouldn't mind buying that. I like the way that looks. Even the headset, stylistically looks neat. It's a really sleek design. I like the stuff that they're showing off, and I never buy these kind of game specific accessories, but that stuff looks awesome. I don't know what you guys think.
It's the color scheme, man.
It's so good.
They said they're going for NASA punk, and I think they actually nailed it. In terms of the trailer, there's a lot to talk about that we're gonna have to do in another separate video from this, because it was just so long and we couldn't give it the proper depth that we'd want to talk about. But I want to say that I think something that a lot of the games that we saw in this presentation were going for fantastical or sci-fi fantasy, like Star Wars is. And actually I thought a lot of what they showed off in Starfield here looked very grounded. And I think it has a lot to do with material choices.
It's so good.
And it's not overly busy, it's just busy enough. It's it has a little bit of retrofuturism in it at the same time, because it's 70s or maybe early 80s NASA. And I just like the way the ships and all the guns look and everything. And the color scheme is just great. So
this is the first time I would say that a Bethesda game looks genuinely beautiful.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I don't think that most of their prior games look very good. I really don't. They never got that down. They were okay, I suppose, at best, but they were pretty ugly in a lot of ways, but were beloved for what they did from a gameplay perspective. I think Starfield looks genuinely beautiful. I love the designs on display here. Just it's an awesome looking game.
Yeah, and actually, if you go back to the trailer that came out last year, it does seem like in some of the same locations, they've actually made pretty big improvements to the way shadows look, to the density of some of the environments, to the lighting. It's all kind of they've really pushed it forward, and I think it looks like a lot better in this showing than it ever has before. So I'm really impressed with what they're doing, and I hope the game comes out in a really polished state.
Todd Howard even mentioned on a Q&A session, I guess, that id Software helped them with the motion blur implementation.
Promising.
Which is
cool.
That's pretty cool. Because
there
is motion blur in here for a change, which is again something that had been absent from prior games created by Bethesda Game Studios. But yeah, we shouldn't get too into the weeds on this. There's so much to say about Starfield, both from a technical standpoint, a gameplay standpoint, all of this stuff. It looks to be something genuinely special. And again, I'm not somebody that's really into open world stuff anymore, but this is the first time where I look at like the possibilities, what you can do and go and get actually excited about that.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
I get many Mass Effect vibes here with regards to side missions. Both may be good and bad because they say like 1,000 worlds. And that makes me roll my eyes at the same time as maybe being like, maybe they did something interesting there. Maybe it's not just procedurally generated nothing, you know.
As I tweeted out earlier this week, though, I feel like the ultimate Easter egg still would be to integrate some of their prior game maps into specific planets. Like, I love the idea of crash landing on this like remote little planet, and then you pass out, and then when you open your eyes, you're riding in the cart from Skyrim. And then they go through that whole intro, the dragon comes, and then you escape from that whole introduction sequence and get back to your ship and leave.
Imagine if they did one planet that's just Daggerfall, the whole Daggerfall map.
Dude, like, yes, in the original, like, pixel art style and everything.
Yeah.
Like, there could be some, like, the game seems to be taking itself pretty seriously, of course, but I would love to see Easter eggs like that. And honestly, with 1,000 planets, surely they thought of something like this. Or, you know, of course they did. It's just a question of whether they were able to implement it or not, right? But obviously there'll be so much more to say. But I think the takeaway here is that we all pretty much enjoyed that show. It was probably the best show Xbox has put on since I started working for Digital Foundry.
Yeah.
This is the best thing they've done in the last 10 years, I would say, just in terms of like showing good stuff. And it's... They fixed some of the problems we had at their presentation. A lot of great games shown, just a lot of promise here. Really, really enjoyable.
Just to echo what John said, like, I think it's good to show off the Starfield in an aspect like this. I think the only thing I would have wished here is that instead of like all the trailers before it, maybe there were 2 other presentations of like slightly shorter length. That they don't need to be so epic as this, but like maybe we could actually get a bit better sense of what the heck Hellblade 2 is. With a longer form video on the same time as we're showing off Starfield. But they were going to be doing that today apparently. So one thing I just want to say is like, yeah, we shouldn't take too much from just one of these big conferences, because honestly E3 was so problematic, but the thing it did get right was that it was a multi-day event. So you got more out of it.
All right. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for this special episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as we kind of went through all of the trailers in this. And we'll be back shortly with another discussion on Starfield. We'll be doing a DF Direct on the Starfield Direct. Lots of good stuff to come. Boy, I wish we could convince Todd Howard to join us on here. Maybe that could happen
one day.
No, I'm not teasing it because it's not going to happen. But still.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching. And from us to you, we love you guys. And we'll see you next time.